Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Copeland. I am a new voice to the Renewable Roundup podcast. And today we've got a really special episode to celebrate our 1 year anniversary of this podcast. So you're hearing me because I've been behind the scenes, but today I have the privilege to interview Russ and Ian, both of the two founding hosts of our podcast, and really excited to just pick their brains about the last year, what's going on, and even look a little bit into the future, hopefully. So welcome to the podcast, Russ, Ian. So happy to be on this side of the mic with you guys.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. And I also would say to the listeners that you may be behind the scenes, but you and Garika are absolutely crucial. It doesn't happen without you two getting it done.
It's a privilege, truly. It's been so fun. We started this podcast a year ago, really with the hopes of just bringing more value to the corporates and developers that we work with on a daily basis. And we thought, let's give them something that is quick, valuable, something that they can listen to, things that are happening in the market right now. And so it began to evolve. And over time, we really ended up with a lot of guests that were just bringing so much great content to really important topics. So it's been fun to watch it evolve over the last year from something that was just a quick value add to something that, now we're going deeper with each of our guests and being able to unpack really important topics. So it's been really cool to see the evolution of it all.
Agreed.
Definitely.
I'd love to hear your perspectives on what's been going on this last year in the Renewable Roundup podcast. What did each of you hope that this podcast would become, and has it become that? I'd love to hear your perspective.
My hope was that I would become a podcast star with thousands and thousands of weekly listeners. And my dream has not been realized because I'm no longer on the podcast. So no, I'm just kidding. I kind of switched roles midway through this podcast and have been extremely pleased that it's still going. Honestly, I, like a lot of people back in like the early 2000s, I had a blog at one point, and I quickly realized that it's really easy to start a blog and really hard to keep a blog going. And a podcast is kind of the same way. And I'm amazed that and pleased that we're still going, and not only that we're still going, but it's really good. Like great interviews, great guests. There's just so much to talk about in this space, and Russ and I have a lot of things to say, and this gives us an outlet for not only us but the people we're interviewing to be able to just have their voice heard, which is fun.
Well, you are an OG, Ian. You are a superstar in our books. Even though just starting at the beginning,
Thanks,
you've brought a lot of value to this podcast, and so I know we can all go back and listen to those original episodes and gain a lot from them. So, Russ, has anything surprised you about this podcast journey? You have been there every single week throughout the last 52 weeks of podcasting and releasing episodes. So has anything surprised you about this journey?
I think so. I think Ian's comment about it easy to start and hard to keep going. One of our colleagues said at the beginning, most podcasts don't make it past 4 episodes. And, thinking, I hope it does. And, little celebration cup of tea when we hit our 5th episode. What I would say is, for me, it's been a bit like parenting. It's taken a lot more effort than I thought it would, but it's also been a lot more rewarding. We've had a lot of fun. We kind of wanted it to be interesting, informative, and thought-provoking, and I found it that. I hope that one or two listeners have as well. I also think it's been, really interesting to learn, and I've kind of expanded my knowledge. So yeah, it was surprising, I think, how much effort it took, but also surprising about how great it's been and how rewarding and enjoyable it's been.
Love that. In looking back across the episodes that we've produced over the last year, are there any of the topics that we've discussed or any conversations that we've had with any guests that have really changed your own perspective, Russ?
Oh, wow. Okay. there's so many things. I think in the early days, I really enjoyed the debates with Ian, and it really made me actually think about things more deeply. And Ian really challenged me, especially in the run up to the podcasts. We were talking about what the topic might be, and choosing our topics and what we were going to do. And he actually got me thinking about things, which I think it was great, because I think sometimes there's a lot going on, and we've done things for a while. It's easy to kind of just I don't know, not become cynical, but just become a bit sort of, oh yeah, that happens. So that was really great in the early days, the kind of thinking about things and what was going on. More recently, I've really enjoyed hearing the guests' experiences and their views, how they've tackled challenges. We've had a whole raft of guests talking about things like that, and I guess I've just really enjoyed hearing their sort of experiences of how they've overcome those challenges and their views on where things are going. So yeah, I think that for me has been the kind of highlight.
Russ, that's so great. What has been the most memorable moment for you? Maybe it was a prediction or a guest insight that really sticks with you, because I know you've talked to a lot of people and there's a lot of incredible information. So tell us what has stuck out to you thinking back.
Yeah, when you said you wanted to do this podcast, I was kind of going back through all the things we've done and thinking about and looking at them. I think the some of the things that, probably the three things that kind of stand out from, to be honest with you, so many great guests. Recently we did the podcast on the community wind farm. Callum McDonald came on and he talks about how they set that wind farm up, and I knew that project, but the kind of insight that I got from him, and when he talks about what he did, I suddenly almost left with this feeling like, do you know what might seem like a huge and almost impossible task for a community to do is actually very doable. It's not necessarily common, but the way he set it out made me feel really positive that actually that was a thing that could be done. And incredibly, obviously they have, and it's been very successful, and the way that they kind of then took it forward and made it a reality, and really like brought it into the community, that really kind of made me sit up and really think about that, and how amazing that was. And I think the other things that I would say is, we've had a couple of podcasts with Pascal Alin from Alight, who has talked about on-site. Now, that's not something that's necessarily received a lot of press, but I was really interested to hear all of the challenges that can sort of come as part of trying to do on site in the portfolio and with the individual sites, and how they can be overcome, and what to look for and things happen, because I thought that was a great learning experience, and it was really interesting in an area that I probably didn't know as much as I thought I knew. But as soon as I started talking to Pascal, I was like, wow, that's incredible. I think the other one I will quickly mention, because there's loads of people like Letitia Amida and Stephanie Moran and Gregorio Schmidt who talked about all sorts of great things. The other one I've mentioned was actually someone from SE, and it's a bit more of a personal one. So Craig Cons came on to do a podcast with me, and somehow at the beginning we got talking about mountain biking, and we still keep in touch. In fact, he came on holiday to the UK and went mountain biking and sent me some of the pictures from Scotland, and made me very jealous. So it's not just hearing about the kind of things that people do in their like work-day lives and things. He's actually found some really interesting things that people do with their own lives as well.
I love that. I loved it to see and hear the connection that we make to the work that we're all doing, and the main goals that we have in common. So those are great examples. I really enjoyed those episodes, Russ. This podcast is about renewable energy and market insights. So I want to move us in a little bit into the direction and ask some questions under that lens. So Ian, a question for you. If you had to summarize the renewable energy market in just 3 words over the past year, what would they be, and why would you choose those words?
Yeah, great question. So word number one would be unpredictable. I think nobody could deny this, and that's because in our world today, so many things that are happening have energy implications, and the world in general is unpredictable, especially when you roll kind of politics and stuff into it. A lot of changes over the past year that nobody could foresee. The second thing I'd say is resilient. So like despite constant setbacks and feelings of like doom and gloom around policy changes or other things like that, the renewable energy market just marches on. And this is the same as it's been since the beginning of time. Like new technologies find a way, and there's some great technologies out there to produce energy from renewable sources, and it's a very resilient market. And my third word is interesting. I think you hear this a lot from folks that are in the energy space. It's just a really interesting place to be, especially now with everything going on. It's never a boring day in the office when you're getting to hear about cool solutions and understand problems that customers of ours may be having, and ways that we're trying to work with them to solve those. So yeah, those would be my answers.
I love that you said the word interesting, because Russ says it a lot in our podcast episodes. Because when we invite guests on, the truth is that we're learning, he's learning right alongside of all of our guests, right? So he's learning some things that are new and hearing some, perspectives and things that are brand new that they didn't discuss ahead of time. So I love that word, because that's the reality of, the industry that we're in, is it's always changing. And a lot of us get to do a lot of really cool, interesting work. So I love that you said that. On that note, what was the biggest renewable energy story of the year that you think, Ian, didn't get enough attention? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at the energy news necessarily every day, so I could be off base here, but I think it's natural that stuff doesn't get enough attention that isn't quite ready for prime time. And some of the technologies maybe you could put in that category. So fusion, for example, gets kind of sporadic press, or when there's a big breakthrough of some sort. But I do think increasingly that fusion is really important, and at some point when there's a major breakthrough, it's probably going to revolutionize energy. And then similar, maybe geothermal. Geothermal is obviously in lots of applications already, being used in lots of places. I think it's super cool. Tyler on our team has done a lot of research into it and has kind of helped us be educated. And then, obviously there's been loads of stories about AI. And I read a blurb last week somewhere talking about how we need to stop thinking about AI as how it can help us with efficiency in our work, and start thinking about how AI can help us solve problems that we could not solve in the past. Examples of like math problems that have been unsolvable for generations, and AI has solved them in a matter of minutes, right? And I think we need to start thinking that way in the world of energy. What are those problems that we have not been able to solve, and how can AI help us solve them? And fusion would be example number one, because the gains we're making are because of AI technology. So yeah, those are things that come to mind. Curious, Russ, what you would say though.
I think it's really interesting, because I think one of the memorable podcasts that we did was actually the one on fusion, and I think that's a really interesting and important area. I'm also quite a big advocate of hydrogen, particularly around transport. We'll see where that goes. For me, the thing that I actually chose on this one was a story that I felt like appeared and then seemed to disappear, and it didn't get enough attention, because I think to me, it just didn't get enough love. We didn't kind of look at that and go, actually, that's a good thing. And it was a story that emerged about renewables overtaking coal as the world's biggest source of energy. Most of that being solar. And obviously, as prices to deploy solar had fallen and deployment had ramped up, it was particularly evident in like lower income countries. And when you actually delve behind the headline, it was not like should we say, oh, I've added another solar project in Spain where maybe the grid's heavily decarbonized. It's actually, we're adding solar projects in India and Africa and in places that were maybe heavily reliant on coal, and actually making, again, a bigger bang for our buck. So it kind of appeared, and it then disappeared so rapidly. And I thought that was actually quite an important milestone that I think we should have just thought a bit more about.
That's such a good point, because I think we definitely have a tendency, maybe there's a human tendency, but in industry and business too, when things are moving so fast, we don't celebrate enough. We just move on to like the next big problem because there's so many of them. But yeah, I agree with you. It's worth celebrating the exciting wins. Who would have thought, even 20 years ago that we would hit that moment so soon? So
yeah.
Well, and talking about, moving on from big wins quickly, throughout the last year, either of you can answer this question. We've covered policy changes and market shifts, as well as new technologies. But what development do you think will have the biggest long-term impact on businesses that are pursuing sustainability goals?
So in terms of the trends, I think there are some things that kind of stick out a little bit. So there's an obvious answer that's going to be AI. Okay, that's changing demand and the price at which people pay for energy. There's all the stuff in networks. I think there's another answer that seems quite obvious, which is around the GHG protocol and those updates. But I think not necessarily that either of them are the biggest thing, because I think actually when it comes to organizations, they will actually work out how to deal with it. And to use Ian's term, they're very resilient, and the energy is very resilient, and it finds a way. So I kind of think at the moment we seem to be in a place where there's a sort of general kind of demand, geopolitical and regulatory, even global economy environment. And that's the thing, because, for example, if energy prices rise again, it helps drive the shift to renewables. If regulation becomes more favorable, it helps. If supply chains ease, and so on and so forth. So I actually think it's all kind of down to that global environment, and it's just much more complex, which is a very woolly and probably quite a slightly rubbish answer, because it's not like, right, what you need to watch is this. But I think there's so many bits. It's almost like like those mechanical watches where there's all those lovely gears and cogs that mesh together, and it all happens in the background, but what you see on the front is the time. And I think that's kind of what it's like. There's lots of things that could drive it or change it, but it's all that kind of interplay of what happens together.
my answer was the soaring global temperatures, sorry. And just, on the one side, the human impact of that everyone is seeing, right? And all of us Americans are learning in amazement that like only 25% of people have air conditioning in France, for example. But on top of that, like just how quickly temperatures are changing. Like the graphs are becoming undeniable now when you just see like temperature change over the last like 100 years, forget about thousands. And the whole thing is just quickly becoming more salient and harder for people to ignore. Whether, it's almost like, it doesn't matter what you think the reason is for it all. We have to do something about it, right? And I think that story is the reality of that is gonna pull more people in to wanting to solve the problem, which is gonna be great. Hopefully pull, more governments into being willing to take actions that are gonna move us in the right direction.
That's a really good point. I'm sat here today, and I can definitely say that 0% of podcast hosts in the UK have air conditioning, but 100% of them wish they did. So, you know what? Somebody said to me the other day, Ian, "Welcome to the coolest summer of the rest of your life," and it's kind of that just hit in such a way, as you said, the global temperatures are rising rapidly, and there's so many changes. So, yeah, that's a really good answer.
That's great. And with both of you having so many years independently, but also combined in the energy industry, I want to ask you this. What is one common misconception about the energy transition that you wish more people understood?
There's so many to choose from. Everything from, renewable energy is not economically viable. I hear that, which is kind of just laughable, right? I mean, it's like clearly people don't know what they're saying when they say that. Too, windmills kill a lot of birds. There's a lot to choose from. I don't know if my answer here quite qualifies as a misconception, but it's something I think I would change more people's minds on if I could. When an issue becomes politicized, it becomes very hard for people individually to truly have the freedom to decide what they think about it. We see this in lots of different cases, right? People quickly have an emotional judgment or a political alignment that moves them in one direction, and reason can kind of go out the window. And unfortunately, that's really happened in the US, maybe less so in other countries, but in the US in particular, when it comes to renewable energy and climate change. And I think it's a misconception that this is primarily a political issue. It's been kind of adopted by politicians on one side or the other with one slant or a different one, and has politicized it and confused it and made it much more complicated and slow moving than it needs to be. And I think there's a lot of complexity there, but yeah, that would be my answer. If somehow we could get politicians to, in some sense, care less about it, in another sense they need to care more about it, right? But if it could become less of a flashpoint, there'd be an easier kind of rally cry around, hey, let's solve this problem, let's figure out what to do about it. So Russ, what do you think?
I think that once again you've done what you've done so many times on the podcast, Ian, and you shared what's really quite a deep thought, and that's really good. I think I pick out maybe one element that you touched on, and the element I would try and pick out is that sustainability and success do go hand in hand for organizations. Get the right things in place for that organization, and sustainability is not a barrier, it's actually a success factor. So you said it, renewable energy is cost viable and it makes sense. For example, reduces your exposure to volatile gas markets or in energy markets, things like that. So and it's not just the energy, there's so many other things that I've seen, when we've done this, talking to people on these podcasts, that actually, getting the right things in place, success has come and has gone absolutely hand in hand with the transition and the sustainability, and it's amazing to see. So that I think would be my misconception, try and breach that. In some ways, sustainability is this barrier, it's going to hold you back, it's going to stop things, it's going to, it's not good for business and good for individuals and good for communities, because actually it is.
Yeah, good answer.
Awesome. We are now going to move into some questions, talking a little bit more behind the podcast. So Russ, you've been leading the conversations every week for a year. So after a year of discussing renewable energy every week, what question do you find yourself being asked most by customers or colleagues or industry leaders? What do those questions look like?
I think those questions are something around the lines of what's going to happen next, what's the future, where is it going? But I think the reality is maybe the slightly unasked question is often, how can we be more successful with whatever it is X that are doing? How can we be prepared and ahead and ready and take advantage? How can we do that? So I think we often get asked, what's going on, what's going to happen next? But the reality is, what that's meaning is, how do we understand where we are and what's coming so that we can be prepared and be successful?
Basically, Russ, tell us the future is what people want.
Yeah. I think that's probably look, gaze into your crystal ball and tell me what's going to happen. And as one of my former colleagues once said, I can give you a forecast, and the forecast will be anything, but it won't be right, because it never is. And there you go.
That's good. Okay, so digging a little bit deeper, is there a topic, a trend, or a guest that you, Russ, have wanted to feature, but you haven't had the chance to have them on yet, or it's a topic you haven't had a chance to explore yet? What is in your brain that needs to become a podcast episode?
Well, I think we need some big hitters back on maybe as guests. So I'd love to get some big hitters from both sides of the of the Atlantic. On our side, maybe we've got the president of the EU, or maybe the UK Prime Minister. I think on your side, I'd love to get the two guests. I'd love to get, obviously, I'd love to get the president himself on, and I'd love to have Ian back on. Because I think we get some big hitters. But in reality, the thing that's in my mind that we haven't done, and I'm actually addressing on it right now, working a little mini series, is the piece I kind of talked about earlier on, and it's about success in sustainability. We touched on it earlier in the year. Stephanie at Caveris gave us some good stuff about the stuff that they've done, and it kind of got me thinking, particularly, obviously, Schneider's been named as the world's most sustainable companies, and you begin to see all the work that's going on, and as you dig into it, there's more. But actually, it's not just that. There are companies of all sizes, organizations of all sizes and stages, from big to small, who are doing all sorts of things and are getting real success. So I'd like to pick out some of those examples that show that success, and maybe showcase those a little bit.
Russ, what I'd like to do is an entire episode where we go through words in the energy industry that are pronounced or referred to differently in the UK and the US.
Let's do it.
And see if we can uncover those.
Let's do it. I've been learning a lot from you and my other colleagues in the US, both culturally and about the use of words. Andrew Lewis has been excellent at educating me as well. I still get it wrong, but let's do it.
Well, one of us gets it wrong. I'm not sure which one.
We'll meet in the middle somewhere. I think the other one we probably need to do, we could probably do like a whole year series of podcasts on energy acronyms, because one thing I've learned about the energy industry is, why have one name for things when you can have three and at least 6 acronyms to go with it.
Completely true. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, I want you to put your future thinking, fast forward brains together, and I want to hear this answer from you. If we are getting ready to record our 2nd anniversary episode for this podcast, what is one prediction that each of you would be willing to make today about renewable energy markets, or maybe it's corporate sustainability or the energy transition, any of the above? Would love to hear what your prediction is. I'm really putting you on the spot with this one, but see what you got.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be something AI related, because AI is moving so fast that it's hard to even imagine the implications. I mean, this guess is not super far-fetched, because we're seeing it already, but I do think the build out of data centers for AI processing is going to cause power prices to spike in lots of places. I continue to hear local utilities talk about how they have policies and regulations in place to make sure that data centers pay for all the new transmission lines, and like, that's all well and good, but it's more complicated than that. And I think rising power prices will continue to make renewable energy and just flexibility solutions as well extremely important, and continue to give a really meaningful market to the developers and technology creators that are trying to move this thing forward. What about you, Russ?
Basically, just what I could say, what Ian said. I think there's a lot in there, and I think it's very true. I think my thoughts were, in terms of sustainability, energy transition, renewable energy markets, I think we're probably a bit fluffier and a bit simpler. It's just this: it's not going away. It is constantly changing, which is all the things that Ian said. And what we actually need to do is to adapt to that and continue to change with it. And as you said, right, close to the top of this, Ian, find a way, because that's what happens. And to be honest with you, that's one of my experiences over many, many years in working and in business in organizations is ways are found. The things that come up are never the things that people predict. They're never the things like, oh, that could hurt us. It's not that. Something else happens. And a whole bunch of good people get together and work out how to make to deal with it and how to make it happen. And that's why I think we'll be talking about hopefully next year about how things have been made to happen.
Well, I can't wait to have those conversations and to be celebrating year 2, because I know it's going to happen. We are on a roll and we love producing these episodes. So before we close this out, though, I have a couple of quick bonus lightning round questions for you. Russ, are you ready? Ian, jump in, but we'll make these really quick, abbreviated answers. But what is one technology you'll be watching closely in the next year?
Batteries, because we have to, and wind, because I think it's going to come back and it's have a resurgence.
Predictable. Russ loves batteries. I would say fusion.
Awesome.
Ian loves fusion.
That's good. Next question. Biggest opportunity for companies pursuing renewable energy. What is it?
Bigger companies will be around, I think, the integration of various sources into their portfolio, and smaller companies will be new ways to get renewable energy, for example, cohorts and things like that, or working with utilities to get those benefits.
Yeah, I think it's my turn to say storage. I think storage will be part of it. It'll depend on the cost curves of some of those technologies, but this isn't maybe necessarily renewable energy, but I think flexibility is going to be a big part of the equation too, and a big part of the opportunity space for companies of almost every size.
That's great. And we're still aligned even a year in. So I love to see it, Russ, Ian. This has been so good. Thank you for just reminiscing, looking back on the podcast over the last year. Thank you for being the originators of these great conversations and for leading well and driving value through, the guests and the conversations that we're having. So it's been an awesome year. Can't wait for year 2. So we appreciate it. And if you're listening, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss our updates and the new podcast episodes that are releasing. But thank you both for being on. Thanks for allowing me to host this special episode. It's been so much fun, and I know our listeners will enjoy listening to it. So
thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having us and thanks for hosting. And Ian, thanks for joining me again. I've enjoyed it as always.
Of course.